And welcome back, students, as we continue discussing Python. All right, our topic for today, of course, is that of variables. Now, in, of course, Python, there are several different things to note in comparison to other programming languages. First of which, of course, is that in language such as Java, you have to declare what type of variable you are going to be using. Python's not quite so picky. So, for example, I'm just going to show you here in the file here. If I were in Java, if I wanted, let's say, to create an integer variable, so a positive or a negative whole number, I would have to take like int and then say like num equals 3. All right, and then we use a semicolon to show the end of the statement. Well, Python, if you know, doesn't care about semicolons, so we don't have to worry about that. Python also, like I said, it's not as picky, so you don't actually have to put int in front of it. You would just say num equals 3, and that's it. You don't have to use a semicolon to indicate the end. It's just that. All right, so that's really all that's to it. Now, I'm going to show that here in our main program here. I'm just going to remove our previous statements, and I'm going to, of course, create some variables. So I'm going to say, let's just use x, y, and z because these are simple variables. So x equals 3, y equals 2, and let's say z is equal to 0.5 or 1.5. Sorry. So if you look at these, you have two different number types, and that's how Python handles things. Pretty much you have integer number types, you have these right here, or you'll have floating number types, which are like z here, which are decimals or doubles, however you want to think about it from other programming languages. So these are the main two formats of numbers that Python's going to attempt to handle. So that's really all that's to it, except for a couple things when it comes to actually naming variables. So let's say I want to create a variable that is going to represent the value of a sum of numbers. Well, I can use technically anything I want. I could just have it be the letter F, But if I just use a letter variable, the problem with just using that, unless I'm doing something like where I'm just testing code, it doesn't actually contain much meaning. So when you make your variable names, you always want to make sure that they have some kind of meaning. So if my thing is, for example, a sum, so sum is equal to, let's say, 1 plus 2, that makes sense because it's adding 1 and 2. Now, we can, of course, also do something, let's say average. So average is equal to, and I can use things like orders of operations and parentheses and stuff like that. So I could say 4 plus 5 plus 6, parentheses, divided by 3. Okay, and now I have a code for an average. All right, now let's go ahead and rewind back here just a little bit because one of the nice things about variables is because they can represent values, we can actually do multiple different things with those variables. So for example, I can say x is equal to 3, y is equal to 2, and then I could do something like z is equal to x plus y. So now the value of z should be 5. All right, and I could test this simply just by saying print z. All right, and it'll try to print out z. So let's go ahead and run this, and we get 5. So we know that that program is working correctly. All right, so in that regard, one thing to keep in mind when you start working with variables is that orders of operations that we're used to in math, PEMDAS, parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, and all that stuff, is going to apply here. All right, so if you wanted to do the highest order of things, parentheses is going to be first. You don't really have to worry about exponents in programming, unless you're using like a math class, but we're not going to talk about that right now. Instead, you're mostly going to have to think, okay, parentheses is first, then multiplication and division, then addition and subtraction. And of course, it's going to work left to right. So if I go back to my program here, and I change this to z is equal to x plus y, but I'm going to change this to x plus y, or how about actually not x plus y, let's make it x times y. But I'm going to change this to y is also going to subtract x. All right, so now I have a very simple program again. So let's go ahead and run that. And you see now I get the value of -3. All right, because it's going to do what's inside the parentheses first. It did 2 minus 3, which is -1. And then -1 times 3 gave me -3. Right? It's a real quick, simple program just to kind of demonstrate how variables work. Now, as we get into using other variables and printing them and joining with strings and all that other stuff that we're going to do over these next couple lessons, this very simple example will quickly blow up into something much more powerful. So this is really all there is for today, folks. It's a really quick overview topic of what variables are and how they work. There's not as much nuance to really worry about compared to other languages, because if I want to make just change this to, let's say, 2.5, it's now just 2.5. And I can run that code, and I should, of course, now I have a -1.5 because now it's a double type. And that's all it's to. There's no fancy juggling between the types like we have to do with like a language like Java, because we have to declare int, or we have to declare double, or we have to declare float, etc. So that's it. And I will see you next time.